So, happy Sunday, first of all, buona domenica. I just have some fresh ginger tea here, and if you want to grab something lovely and relaxing to drink, then we can sit down and have a little chat this morning. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I asked everyone to send me questions now that I've recently moved from Rome to Florence in Italy. Lots of things to answer, and it's a super exciting time for me right now. So let's have a little chat. Okay, first of all, lots of people asking me why Florence and why Florence after Rome, how do the two cities compare? Perché ho scelto di vivere proprio a Firenze tra tutte le splendide città italiane che ci sono? Che progetti hai nel prossimo futuro? Sei fantastica comunque, grazie, una tra le luci più splendenti di questo buio mondo. Thank you so much. Some of you may not know this, but Florence was actually the first place I ever lived in Italy. I've lived for many, many years in Rome. I've also lived in Positano on the Amalfi Coast. But the first place I ever lived was Florence, and this was way back when I was living in Barcelona. And, and I was on a flight at 1 a.m. and I ran into this Italian, and we were just talking about Italy, and he didn't even live in Italy, but we were talking, and I just decided in that moment, I thought, right, I'm gonna change tack, and I've just been studying Spanish for several years, so I decided to move to Florence and start with a new language. And I think Florence is, I mean, what can I say? It's always had that special place in my heart because I have such a beautiful memory of my first time there. This was before it was in the middle of my degree, so I deferred my degree, and after that time in Florence I went back to Australia to finish my degree, and then I went into publishing. But after that, when I made my big official move over to Italy and was looking at getting work and really staying for a long time, that was when I moved to Rome. I think it really depends. If you were studying, then Florence is fantastic and it's a little bit smaller. But I have to say that a lot of people might think that Rome is overwhelming because it's a bigger city. But inevitably, like most cities, you have your neighborhoods that you hang out in and that you get to know all your florist and your butcher and your market and everything. So Rome can feel very intimate as well, as soon as you find your little quartiere, your little zona, and then you become like a local in that little area. Rome is very easy because with the airports there are a lot more flights, so it's if you wanted to be seeing other parts of Europe, it's a lot easier. There are cheap flights from Pisa, but Florence airport is like the flights aren't nearly as cheap as Rome, for example, and I think both cities have so much beauty. It's not like you're comparing, I don't know. It's not like you're comparing Milan, which is there's a lot more corporate offices, there's a lot more opportunities for work, I would say, but it doesn't have that really gratuitous beauty which you might be making the move for, and that's why I sort of find it hard to, also because I'm very loyal to Rome still, I find it hard to compare Florence and Rome because they both have beauty, they both have that really, I don't know, that authenticity, that tradition, that sense of nostalgia. If you're looking for, la dolce vita, that kind of in the historic center. I mean, I'm speaking mainly about the historic center because that's usually where most expats live and where most people who come on holiday are staying. And so yeah, but if I drill down, I think that for me, but I think for me, I mean, I know Rome so well, so well. I could do Rome on my bicicletta, on my bicycle, blindfolded, and I would know every little cobblestone, everything. It's just, I really know it very well. Of course, there are always restaurants that I haven't heard of, or there's always a little boutique that's a surprise, but basically I've lived there for many years. Like, I know Rome better than I know my home city where I was born in Australia, to give you an example. So I felt like a change, and also I think that Florence for me isn't really a new city. I mean, I'm very familiar with it, and if you've lived in Italy, you know that distances are so short, and so if you're living somewhere, it's not like you're confined to that town or city. Often I will have friends when I was living in Rome. Kylie, we're going out for dinner, and we're going to Tuscany. Like, there's someone who has a house and they're throwing a dinner or a lunch or a whole weekend in Tuscany, which is the region Florence is in. So I think that aside from that, like when I lived in Monaco, I was always coming up around with my partner at the time. We were hanging out a lot in Portofino and that whole area. When I lived on the Amalfi Coast, I was still able to be up in Rome. So it's like, wherever you are in Italy, that's why I love this country, is because wherever you are, you really have all the other cities very close by, and the train travel's fantastic. So I don't think it's like, oh, your decision will. I know it's hard to make that decision. I've like gone back and forth so many times, but I don't think it is ultimately going to determine whether you have a good time in Italy or not. I mean, they're very similar cities. A lot of you ask me about finding work, and I can't really say. It's like, it's so hard to give an answer on how employable you will be in a city. Oftentimes it's just based on that one little opportunity that you find, or someone's starting up something and you happen to be in contact with them. It's like all about networking anywhere in the world now, no? So I think also for me, I work from home, and all I need really is to have beauty. And because I have my own business, I work for myself and freelance. So my home is very important, because that's where I'm always filming, and that's where I'm cooking and photographing and doing interviews. But I don't have to necessarily rely on finding clients in Florence or in Rome. I mean, in fact, all of my clients are usually foreigners, or TV networks, or a foreigner who wants me to do some work in another country, and then I'll fly out and this is my base. I would say Florence is a little bit more elegant. I mean, in Italy there is a long history of the northerners sort of fighting with the southerners, in the sense that there is a bit of prejudice, and like, oh, the northerners are cold and businesslike, and the southerners are warm, but peasants basically. And in some circles this is like very light and jovial, and they just joke around, and there's this sort of famous film called Benvenuti al Sud, which is Welcome to the South, and they show just all the stereotypes between the northerners and the southerners. But there is also, I mean, there used to be quite a lot of tension, because there was such prejudice. People coming up to find work in the north were having to leave their homes and were looked down upon. But generally, if you're looking at the history, Florence has this culture of artists, of artisans, craftsmen, basically. I mean, so many boutiques around my house, like a little cobbler, the tailors. There are a lot of these tiny little craftsmen who are working on furniture, reupholstering furniture. I mean, there is this long history of that, and I obviously love that, and it's also an interesting place for me to start this next side project of my line of clothing, because I want to be speaking with tailors and people who can source me like beautiful little buttons and all the little details of this clothing line that I'm making, which is going to be have a high attention to detail. And so it is beautiful to have it here. And like, for example, there's Prato, this little town that's just outside of Florence, where all the warehouses are for manufacturing garments, and this is, they're manufacturing garments for all the huge brands, like the iconic ones that you've heard of internationally. It's here in Tuscany. So yeah, I like that element. And then, I talked to a friend of mine who's American, and she's an artist, and then another friend of mine who is a writer, and they've both lived in Rome for many, many, many years, married to Italians, and they just said, yeah, they feel like there's a little bit more of an artist's culture up here. And it's funny because I was at a jazz concert just the other night, and I looked up and I could see the shutters of my old apartment where I lived when I was it 20, I think, and I just remember being that girl and thinking, one day I'm going to have a place that is so beautiful, and where I can make all these things that I want to make. I can write a book. I can do all these dreams that I have. And yeah, it's interesting when you sort of look back and think, yeah, I that wasn't just something I told myself at 20. I really did it. I've made it happen just exactly as that 20-year-old girl would have wanted. It's not like a huge achievement, but it is interesting to see the passage of time and see how a lot of people say, oh, well, Italy, it's got so many problems, and it is hard. It's super hard to make it work financially here. Not because it's expensive, but it's just finding work is, you've got to have a plan for that, right? You can't just rely on getting work, because there are a lot of Italians who are out of work, and they're bilingual and have a lot of family contacts, which helps. And so, yeah, I feel like you need to have a lot of resilience if you want to live in Italy. The romance of it is beautiful. The beauty, the lifestyle is, of course, anyone can appreciate that and live it and be motivated by it. But the work situation, that can really get you down. So if you haven't got a lot of, if you're a true romantic, I think you can romanticize anything, and so you get yourself through the hard times. You get yourself through the times where it's not all perfect and as you would like it to be. I've never had a problem with that. It's like I've lived in some really incredible, beautiful places, and I've had times where I've been totally broken and struggling, but still very, very happy. And I think it has to say something that it's almost, I think, like about 10 years. Excuse me. It's about 10 years or so, and I'm still just awed by the beauty here and by the little moments, and it's tough. And I have friends and family who know everything that I've been through, and they say, gosh, I can't believe you're still making it work. But the truth is, it's pretty extraordinary that after 10 years of seeing the reality of trying to make a living here and be accepted and assimilate, that I'm still desperately in love with this country. I'm still in love with the lifestyle. I still believe it's all worth it, all the little moments and the beauty and the traditions that still exist that don't exist in a lot of other modern cities or countries. I mean, that says something, doesn't it? I mean, the fact that I'm not, the novelty really hasn't worn off for me. So yeah, I guess if you're wondering if it's going to be worth it, I mean, at least for me, it hasn't faded, this whole love affair. It's just, I still find myself every single day just waking up and thinking, I live here. I don't think there are many places where you can say that, like whether it's a company or a country or even a partner, where after 10 years you still look at them and think, I'm so lucky to have you in my life. So I think if you find something like that, be it a person or a job or a country, then you have to hang on to it. Anne says, yes, I keep reading about how Florence is becoming overrun by tourists. Are you finding that, and is it on par with the issues in Venice? I mean, Venice is a whole other is a whole other situation. I mean, I think the problem with Venice is they say that there aren't young people, whereas here it's very young, there's a lot of life, and whereas with Venice, a lot of the young people are leaving, and so it doesn't have that, you can't have a city really without having young people to make it vibrant, right? Tourists, you can get them in Rome, you can get them in Florence, of course. You can have moments where it's just like you can't move. But I think the longer you live in a city, the better you become at working out the right time of day. When, I go to the market like super early in the morning and there's no one. It's just me and some local women, like older women and older men. And then, when I go for my runs, just making sure that there are always places that you can find to me. It's not like I need to be hanging out on the Ponte Vecchio or around the Colosseum, When you're a tourist and you're visiting those iconically beautiful monuments or historic sites, of course it feels like super congested and you're like, I could never live here, it's like so hectic. But when you're actually just living and you're finding like a tiny little trattoria that's just people going to for lunch who work in the area, or you're running along a path that is just a little bit away from like the main drag, you find these moments of real sort of peace and serenity. What are the best sites to find affordable long-term rentals in Rome or Florence? Can't wait, Kylie. I lived in Florence for 8 years. Your runs along the Arno bring back memories. A lot of people asking how I found my apartment. I have found most of my apartments in Italy through a friend of a friend of a friend. I remember when there was this street that I wanted to live on in Rome, and I could see this palazzo, and I thought, how could I possibly find out if there's anything there available? And then I thought, well, think about it, like the landlords and the tenants who are in this area, in this street, they will generally be congregating at the bar. When you say bar in Italian, it means like the cafe, right? So they will be lined up there at the bar. So don't go and sit down and have your coffee sitting down. Stand up at the bar, network, speak to people, speak to the barista. The barista knows everything, right? He's like, I don't know, like a hairdresser or someone who has all the streets, little gossip and secrets. And so I would stand there, and even when I didn't have very good Italian, like even going like a few times in a row in the week, people start to recognize you, and then they ask what you're doing, and then you say, I'm looking for an apartment preferably in this palazzo, and then you get to, and even if they just hear that there's a girl looking for an apartment, and you go back every week just to sort of check. I mean, this is if I find if you've organized like a temporary accommodation, and then you come over to Italy and you're looking for an apartment, which I think is preferable because you really want to get a feel for the place. And I remember just networking and putting in that time, because Italy is all about people, human relationships. I mean, in many places that's the case, but nowhere more so than Italy. And so oftentimes it's been through a contact. And when I say contact, it doesn't necessarily mean a boyfriend or a friend or family contacts. It really can just be a case of you're going to that same bar every morning, and then they get to familiar with you, and you'd be surprised. They'll say, that little signora she has a room to rent, or her son's moving away for a year, and so there might be something coming up next month. You've got to put yourself out there and think. Think how people used to find apartments in the old days. I mean, this was the way before the internet. Even when I go on holiday, people say accommodation is sometimes just a place to crash, or you just want to get in a good location. For me, I mean, you guys know I'm very tactile, I'm very visual, I'm very my whole mood changes depending on the colors I'm surrounded by. So for that reason, I don't mind putting in the work. I mean, I will search for months, and I will click into every single ad and every single photo, and just seeing, and then write to so many people. I mean, I will send off a hundred of. I remember one time with looking for a place in Rome, I wrote to every single Airbnb listing in the neighborhood that I want, every single one, because I thought, I wrote to them just asking if they were interested in long-term rental, even if it says that they're not on the Airbnb listing. But then I wrote to them saying, oh, and if you know of anyone. So you've got to put in the work to network. And that's how I find these places. It doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes it is through, a friend of a friend. And that was the case with this one. I remember, so I came here in Florence and it was in summer, and it was just grueling. Like, I was sweating. I organized all these appointments. Some of the agencies, I'd come specifically to Florence. I made a special trip to fly into Italy just to go to these meetings. And then the agencies that I'd set up meetings with would just either forget, or they'd show up late, and then they'd say, oh, the landlord's changed their mind. Okay, yesterday's search for a house in Florence was a disaster. So hot, and 4 of the agencies that I had organized appointments with stood me up or created some sort of, and it was so frustrating. This is just part of the fun. It's part of the journey, because then when you find that one place where you walk inside, like the way it happened here, I walked inside and I was like, oh, okay, this is it. So exciting. I've got an appointment now to see this place, which I've seen the photos and it looks really, really beautiful. I hope this is my new home. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. But you should have seen like all the places that I went through to find this. I mean, there were just so many, and so many that even the appointment, I didn't even get inside to see the house because it just didn't even get that far. Devi, how long will you be staying in Florence? I think for quite a while. Well, for me anyway. I mean, I tend to live very much in the moment, but that's just because sometimes when you're a freelancer, you can't really plan ahead because you don't have that steady income, right? But thanks to my Patreon supporters, you guys have really helped. Well, first of all, you helped with the fact that Patreon could go away any month, so it's not totally stable, but you do give me a lot of hope. I've got the sort of travel memoir cookbook, and then I have this collection of apparel, of clothing, and then lots of other things, retreats, and all these projects that are going to help people with mental illness, which is like quite a passion for me as well. So yes, staying put is going to help me stay disciplined and be able to focus on all of this work that I have in the pipeline. How do you deal with missing your family? So basically, I speak to my family every day, every single day pretty much. I wake up in the morning and I go out onto my terrazza and I water my plants early before the sun is up and hot, and then I just have my cafe. And I write in my gratitude notes, I write in this little book, or actually what I have been using on and off for years is this great big book, which my dear friend Kieran gave me. And Kieran, you remember, you bought this for me. Look, it says, yeah, from Florence. You bought this when I first moved to Florence when I was 20, and now here I am, all these years later. You can see the progression of my Italian, and here I've written down all my dreams, and I wrote down poetry that I didn't yet understand. It's like these are this is all poetry that I wrote down, when I was just dreaming about being fluent in Italian, and dreaming about even how to, excuse me, I'm sorry about this noisy table. Even when I was just dreaming about like how to make it all work, because you guys know like the visas, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for Australians anyway. I mean, if you're European, it's a bit easier. If you have Italian family. Anyway, the question was family. So I speak to my family after I've written my gratitude notes, usually because I'm often thinking about them in my gratitude. Like, I'm grateful for their support and for their love and for their laughter. We laugh a lot in my family. So so then I'll call them, and when I'm just sitting surrounded by my flowers, and I'll call them and have a nice chat early in the morning. I don't know if you'd agree, but sometimes you could live in the same city as your family or close friends and not hear from them every single day, and yet we are super close and we really need each other. We're very, we really need to hear from each other and sort through our thoughts and our fears and our dreams and everything with each other, my immediate, like the four of us, my sister and my parents. And so we have to hear from each other every day because it keeps us sort of sane and centered. It's the voice, really. Like, we don't do FaceTime or anything. It's just hearing someone's voice. Of course, I would love to have them here, but stay tuned on that. And then also, if you're unable to have the wonderful career you have, what else might you have considered being or working at? I have so much. I mean, this is one of my issues. There are some people who they search their whole life to find their passion. It's like when I was 5 years old, I knew I wanted to do 100 things, and those 100 things have continued to really stimulate me and make me curious well into adulthood. So it's not been, my problem is more about choosing and focusing and doing something well. You can't give up. You can't just try something and say, oh, that didn't work out for me, or it's obviously not my passion because it's hard. Say no. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that necessarily. I mean, sure, it should give you that sense of wonder and that sense of stimulation, but every job in the world has those really hard, boring, tedious, just exhausting elements, and I think it's naive to keep searching for a job that's not going to have that. It just doesn't. Yeah, it is a part of the joy of it. Anyway, am I even answering someone's question, or am I just rambling? Annie, Kylie, what are your thoughts on working for someone versus being your own boss? Was it difficult to switch between being a freelancer, and how do you motivate yourself to keep going even if there aren't many profitable projects at one moment? How would you justify or not listen to those who might see a quiet working period as a failure and try to convince you to get a normal job out of love and care? Annie, I've been there for sure. I mean, my family always worried about me. They have been in times of great financial vulnerability, because it's a big risk. To be a freelancer is like, a lot of people think it's so wonderful to just wake up whenever you want and do your passion for a living, but no, it's like, unless you've got the temperament, unless you're the type of person who can really not get anxious, and I'm not by nature, I'm not a very anxious person. I'm analytical, but I'm not anxious, and so I think that it works for me, like those periods of, but I have certainly had heated conversations with my family who care for me and they want to see me secure, and they don't want to see me so erratic and like financially vulnerable. But it's not even just about the finances. Sometimes it's just about the amount of work that you put in as a freelancer for very little reward. I mean, either you get a client who is just like so difficult and you can't shut off from that. It's not like you just, the weekend comes and you compartmentalize and forget about it. If it's your own business, or if you're the only one working as a freelancer, it's like you take that on, and it's very it is quite a burden. I think sometimes we can be very defensive when people rain on your dream parade, right? Like if you say, I'm going to do this, or if you've already started and you're doing it and it's not going so well, or you've had this period where you don't have a lot of clients, a lot of people can come in and say, well, honey, don't you think maybe you should think about something a little bit more stable? And of course, then we get so worried, because this is human nature, right? Whenever we feel like someone has hit on a little bit of, not always, but sometimes, when they've hit on a point that is already a pressure for us, and then it's like they accentuate or highlight that pressure, we can respond defensively and say, oh, you don't understand, why are you not supporting me? But I think we have to, like you said, we have to remember they come from a place of care and love. And sometimes we also have to think, right, maybe both things are true, right? Maybe I was right to follow this path, but maybe they're also right that I need some more stability in order to make this sustainable. And so I think that I have always tried to set things up so that I don't have everything riding on one project. And sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to do that little job on the side that can keep that money flowing through, right? So sometimes, like you'll hear people say, oh, you've just got to commit to something 100%, and if you don't do that, it will never take off. I don't know about that. Like it is good to have like a little side hustle while you're focusing on your main dream as a freelancer, your main business, because the side hustle that pays your bills, or but it is difficult. It's difficult to manage that. If you can put aside those feelings of hurt that you're like, why isn't this family member supporting me, and just think, okay, ultimately they're kind of right in the sense that to be productive, you need to feel also calm and stable and a little bit secure. And you just have to try and find more hours in the day, and that's why I don't drink, because it's one of the reasons I don't drink, because I don't have time to be hungover. I don't have the money to be blowing it on. I'm talking about binge drinking, of course. Like my parents, they love wine, and so does my sister. But I think in that with that whole mentality of like going out and getting wasted, or doing drugs or anything that sort of you're coming down the morning after. It's like I think there's so many beautiful hours in the early mornings where you could be really growing a whole other side hustle, or you could be taking your business to another level. And so that's why I've always just thought like every hour in my day is precious, and I never want to spend it hungover, because it just and then again with my health as well, like going for my runs, eating a fairly nutritious, wholesome diet is crucial, because it means I can literally get more hours out of my day, or I can be more alert and more present in whatever I'm doing. So I'm not feeling sluggish. Like I wake up and I have so much energy almost every day. And I think it's also because Shannon, my sister, is a nutritionist, and we've always been very conscious of how the food that you put in your body can change your mood and really give you more productivity, I suppose, and or even make you just more present for being with a loved one, right? If you're feeling sort of sluggish and you don't have much life to you, you're not the same as if you're just like full of vitality, and then you can sit there with a loved one or a friend and just be super present with them. Do you know what I mean? David, I love all of your comments, and yes, thank you for all of your support. Do you plan to release any more motivational or poetry videos in the coming months? Yes, I do. Actually, I shot something in the vineyards in August, which I really... I'm trying to work out the best way to do it, because it's sort of talking about being there for people who are feeling down, or even going to a really dark place, like suicidal thoughts. And in my life, I'm I'm fairly upbeat, but I've definitely had those lows where I just think I don't know who to turn to right now. And so I wanted to create a video that would be for that moment of low, when you think I can't call anyone, there's no one who is going to be able to lift me up out of this, even though you might be surrounded by love. When you feel like you can't face even another loved one. I've filmed this video and I'm yet to edit it, but because it's talking about quite serious issues, I'm just trying to think about, and also was looking at advice from a psychologist on how to manage this, because it is quite delicate. I'm seeking some advice from like a therapist who can who can make sure that I'm putting out something that is safe for people. Although it seems like these days on YouTube, people just don't care. They'll throw out advice about everything. But I think mental illness is quite complex. So I don't want to rush into that one without being sure that it's okay. Amelia 2603. I commented on one of your videos asking to share how you stay so feminine, where you find your girl energy, and what is the secret of being childish and tempting at the same time. Thank you so much for being who you are. Oh, what a lovely message. Yeah, it's an important one, isn't it? I think, gosh, it's really... Okay, let's deal with being childish. I think you have to have something in your day which is play. And many people talk about this, right? For example, for me, I love putting music on and then dancing around my house. Like, not just like a little like shimmy over to the dishwasher. I'm talking about like actual dancing. Really, if you have a bedroom, like even if you don't, maybe you don't live alone, even if you have a bedroom, I think it's like you really have, like dancing actually feels quite, we can forget how important it is, but it really loosens you up, and it just it's a great, like it takes away all the stress. And then if you can get a song that really makes you feel just joyful, that's fun, because you're just doing it in your home, so you're not concerned about who's watching you. You're not doing it to like attract, someone. You're just doing it for you. You're just doing it as a totally natural expression of you. In terms of being like feminine but also tempting, I can only imagine here you're talking about like how to kind of navigate that world of being a woman and dressing and projecting a certain image so that you're treated in a certain way. I think that I've always felt that you almost need to teach people how to treat you, because everyone these days has come from such a different upbringing, or they have different models of how men treat women, how women treat women. So I believe that when you start off with someone, it's almost like I take it on as a responsibility. It's my responsibility to communicate to this person how I want to be treated. And I have a lot of female friends who say to me, but I don't want to be that direct. Like I don't want to say that because he may not like me, or that might sound too forward or too soon or too whatever. I find in my experience, these days you have to teach someone how you want to be loved, how you want to be treated, how you want to be spoken to, even how you want to deal with conflict. So I take that on as my responsibility to tell someone, communicate to them what my standards are, what my values are, how I like to be spoken to, or the things that are super important to me. And then if from there they don't treat me accordingly, knowing what's important to me, then I can make some decisions about whether I keep them in my life. But yeah, in terms of being feminine, I mean, I think I have this love of everything nostalgic. I mean, these old films, because there is this femininity that fits me. I mean, it's not everyone's version of femininity, but it's like for me, I like things that feel very sensual and soft, and I absolutely love being a female. Oh my gosh, there are so many things. There's, we are soft and we have so much empathy and emotion into so much that we do. And it's not to say men don't as well. Of course, there are many men who do, but for me, that sort of archetypal femininity, which you'll see in these classic films. Of course, there's lots of things wrong, politically incorrect, that are the Hitchcock films and a lot of Italian films, and there was this femininity that I find I can really get excited about, that I can really celebrate, and there are differences between men and women, and sometimes it's nice to actually say, yeah, we're different, and isn't that beautiful?